Today is the day. Yes, it is EA Sports College Football Early Release Day, and I am very excited for this. The bigger point to be made here is the ratings that we've seen come out in the lead up to this game are eerily similar for BYU in real life. What does that mean for the Cougars, both video game wise and in real life as they get ready for the upcoming Big 12 season? We're talking about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen or view of the day, and a big thank you to all of you who are everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and once again, a big thank you to all of you for tuning in. All right, for those of you out there who are going to be celebrating like I am today, 2 o'clock Mountain Time will be the drop date of when you can play the new version, the brand new version of EA Sports College Football 25. I splurged. I have spent a pretty penny to get access to this game, but let me remind you guys, I am one of those guys who owned every version of that game from the late 90s all the way up through it was July 9th, 2013, when the latest version of EA Sports, then NCAA Football 14 came out. I played that version of EA Sports NCAA 14 all the way through 2021. That is when my Xbox 360, that had been my trusty game system to allow me to continue to play games for years, gave out, got the red ring of death. So I have not played any EA college football for 3 or 4 years to any meaningful degree. I played game here and there with my younger brother who has a functioning game system, but he's been at college and on a mission. So I've not played a lot. I am very excited to have this game. Like I said, it's been 11 years. I am super excited to see this game debut, and I will be reporting back on my initial review of the gameplay and obviously playing with BYU in a moment. I'll also be simulating an entire season to get a feel for what EA Sports projects for BYU in the upcoming year. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's podcast, but the bigger point I wanted to talk about here is that in the lead up to this game, we've seen a number of drops from EA Sports about the rating system, how teams are going to be perceived going into the game, and the ratings for BYU, I think, actually fall almost right in line with what many of us, including experts, fans, and everybody else, expect for the BYU Cougars in real life. Now, we saw the early ratings for BYU overall as an 80. Now, that ties for 12th in the conference with TCU for BYU. Does that mean BYU is doomed to finish in that spot in the conference? No, but if you recall, the early season, or the preseason, I should say, EA Sports Big 12 preseason poll has BYU slated to finish 13th in the conference. In the video game, they're tied with TCU at an 80 rating overall. Now, you break it out to offense and defense. BYU's offensive rating is tied for dead last in the conference. They have a 75 rating in this game, which is tied with the likes of Arizona State, Cincinnati, and Houston. So all newcomers to this conference at the bottom. And the funny thing about it is you look at the offensive ratings, the bottom 4 are tied with TCU clearly ahead of them at a 78. So they believe that the bottom 4 are significantly behind on offense. Where the uptick for BYU comes is where you see the defensive ratings for the Cougars. They are finishing, or they're tied for 9th with a 78 rating. Funny enough, they're tied up with TCU once again on that 78 rating overall. I look at this as a big opportunity for BYU, both in the video game as well as in real life, to surpass expectations. This is a really, really fun opportunity for the Cougars to be one of those teams that seemingly comes out of nowhere and surprises folks. I talked about this last week, that the messaging I was getting, kind of reading between the lines coming out of Big 12 media days, was that Kalani Sitake actually kind of relishes where his team is at right now. Does that mean that he is planning on going out there and riling up his guys and saying nobody believes in you? Maybe so. But I guess maybe he's doing that. I can tell you the strength and conditioning staff is doing that. If you've seen any of the videos that have come out from BYU football from the strength and conditioning staff, they've been chirping at these guys saying, you want to go 5-7 again? Don't put in the effort that you need to put in to complete the workouts we have for you here. This is a BYU program that I think is absolutely fired up to go out there and really stick it to people. I'm looking forward to playing my first opportunity to play with BYU in this video game and get a feel for how things go. Now, the big question for BYU on that offensive rating is what's the quarterback rating? Well, we got a little bit of a glimpse into that via Trayson Bourget. I don't know how Trayson got access to it. Maybe they sent him out to the players early, but he put up a screenshot on Instagram Live. And if those of you saw it, it came out. The highest rated quarterback for BYU in this game is, wait for it, drum roll, please, Gerry Bohanon. The man coming off almost 2 years without playing a meaningful snap of college football. He has a 79 rating in this game. Now, where is Jake Retzlaff? Jake Retzlaff checks in with a 75, which is tied with the aforementioned Trayson Bourget and some person named P. Anderson. Now, P. Anderson has an 85 speed, which makes me think it might be McKay Hillstead, just mislabeled on a name, because there is no P. Anderson on BYU's roster that I am aware of. Other quarterbacks on that rating system include Noah Lugo, obviously coming off a redshirt freshman campaign at a 70 rating, and then Cade Fennegan, who is not going to be playing this season for BYU as he makes a transition to a graduate assistant / student assistant role in real life. He has a 60 rating in this game. So, EA Sports projects that Gerry Bohanon is the head and shoulders best quarterback on BYU's roster. Will that be real life come the start of the football season? We'll see. I still have my money riding that Jake Retzlaff ends up starting game 1 for BYU, but that does not mean by any means that come the end of the season, that Jake Retzlaff is still the guy at quarterback for the Cougars. He is going to have to fend off Gerry Bohanon. He's going to have to fend off Trayson Bourget. McKay Hillstead might be able to enter the fray as well as the season progresses, but you look at it, and it's looking like EA Sports nailed a couple of things on this, especially I think with that offensive and defensive rating. I do think that the offensive rating is being downgraded due to the poor offense BYU experienced a year ago. EA Sports can only go off kind of the most recent examples of what BYU put out there. And what did they put out there last year? Subpar quarterback play, an offensive line that was absolutely atrocious, a running game that was non-existent essentially for 10 games. So I look at that offensive rating and say, yeah, that's pretty fair. The defensive rating actually surpasses a little bit of what I expected, but I think that they're projecting that BYU's defense under Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator, will improve and be a better product and will obviously help BYU have their chances to go out there and win. What will it ultimately yield for BYU? Like I said, I'm going to simulate an entire season, and I will report back on what EA Sports projects for BYU. Are they 4-8? Are they 5-7? Do they be one of those surprise teams that comes out of nowhere and has a 7-5 or 8-4 campaign? I'm looking forward to seeing what the results are. I also have plans in the coming weeks. Give me a couple of weeks to get warmed up for this. I'm looking around maybe August 1st as training camp gets underway about launching a EA Sports online dynasty. I'm going to be playing on a PlayStation 5, and I'm actually really mad that they did not allow us to have cross-platform play. I would have loved to have had an opportunity to play with those of you who play on an Xbox. But if you want to be part of an online dynasty, we'll call it the Locked On Cougars Online Dynasty. Hit me up. LockedOnBYU@gmail.com is the email address. Drop us your gamer tag, and we'll get this fired up and have some fun this upcoming season. I can't guarantee it'll be the fastest moving dynasty because, as many of you know, I'm going into probably the busiest part of my year work-wise, but we will have some fun along the way. And I also plan maybe to stream some of these games live via Twitch as well. The nice part about the PS5 is you can download the Twitch app, which I already have, and I've never used Twitch before, but I plan to log into it and maybe stream some of these games as we play out this season as well. So we'll have some fun. So looking forward to it, but I do look at this and I think it's kind of eerily similar what EA Sports currently rates BYU at and what the real life projections for the Cougars are. Now, can the video game and real life kind of upend that and show that the Cougars are better than they are being advertised to be? Only time will tell, and we'll dig more into that as time goes along here. All right, we're going to talk about a new addition to the BYU football program, one that I think has Jay Hill written all over it. What do I mean by that? We're talking about who Boyd Sorensen is next and why I think he has the potential to be a really, really nice addition down the road for the Cougars. We'll dig into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. I want to remind you guys that eBay has been sponsoring us for quite a while now, and passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive, everybody. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performances: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you need when you're looking for it. The best part is with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home those huge wins with our friends at eBay Motors. So keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Once again, eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only guaranteed to U.S. customers. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for tuning in, whether it's via YouTube, whether it's via the various podcast platforms out there. No matter how you're consuming the show, please leave us a rating and review and let us know what you like about the podcast. Those 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts are always fun. I just noticed just the other day that Spotify has allowed a way for you guys to leave a comment as well. So if you're listening to us via Spotify, please drop us a rating and also share a comment or two about the show. I also appreciate it here on YouTube when you guys like the show, subscribe, rate the show, all that stuff. So thank you in advance for doing so, and appreciate all of your patronage as always. All right, let's talk about Boyd Sorensen. Well, a big commitment, I guess, quite literally big commitment, because he comes from Sugar-Salem High School in Sugar City, Idaho. Now, Sugar-Salem is one of the smaller school powerhouses in Idaho high school athletics, and I have heard the name of the school, but I've not heard of Boyd Sorensen until he announced this. It felt so good. I've been dreaming of making it permanent, and thanks to my Father in heaven, BYU will now be my home. Can't wait. Thank you to Coach Jay Hill, BYU Coach Justin, which is Justin Anderson, and then Kalani Sitake for the offer. Now, Boyd Sorensen is coming home off of a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, played through 2022 at Sugar-Salem High School. But the crazy thing about this is this to me screams everything that Jay Hill did during his time at Weber State that allowed him to have some of the more potent defenses in the Big Sky and, more importantly, in FCS football. Boyd Sorensen, like I said, comes from a 3A program in the state of Idaho, which isn't necessarily always going to be something you're like, okay, we need to get that guy to sign with us. But looking at his high school resume, this has a lot of potential. 6'4", 260 pounds, listed, played football and track and field in high school, played some basketball as well. In football, he had over 100 tackles, 30 tackles for loss, and 12 sacks as a first-team All-State defensive lineman. Those are incredible numbers. And that's just one season, by the way, his senior year. The other thing about this is he played defensive tackle during his time for Sugar-Salem, which he probably figures at 6'4", 260 to play more of a defensive end role for BYU. But if you can bulk him up, play him at 290 or 300, those are some pretty nice numbers. The incredible part to me is this, though. Looking at his high school resume, this is a guy who threw the discus and the shot put in track, but also won the decathlon. Okay, here's the deal. Decathletes don't usually come in at 6'4", 260 pounds. No offense to anybody who is a decathlete out there. They are some of the more iron men and iron women of athletics, because the ability to compete in what would be a heptathlon for the women in 7 events and then 10 events for men, and to compete at a high level in all of them seemingly, that does not happen. And especially doesn't happen for guys who are basketball and football players. But I look at this and I'm absolutely floored at this kid flying under the radar. But once again, it screams to me that Jay Hill may be scooping up a guy that he sees all the potential in the world in. He's going to bring him to BYU. Maybe he gray shirts this year and then gets into BYU in January and starts working out with the team. But in a year or two's time, it feels like Boyd Sorensen could be one of those guys who all of a sudden is like a stud defensive tackle for BYU. And everybody's like, where did he come from? Well, he comes from Sugar-Salem High School in Sugar City, Idaho. These are the type of guys, once again, that Jay Hill brought to Weber State during his time as head coach up there in Ogden. And once again, they would take a couple of years to develop in time, but given the adequate time to do their thing, they became absolute standout players. I don't think you have to look any further than guys like Jack Kelly. Remember, Jack Kelly was a very, very capable player coming out of Kearns High School. He obviously got hurt by the COVID-19 pandemic, slowing down a lot of the recruiting out there in the world. But the thing about it is Jack will tell you that when he got to Weber, he was a pretty raw athlete. Well, under the tutelage of Jay Hill and obviously Mickey Mental, who's now the head coach at Weber State over the past couple of seasons, Jack Kelly has become one of the premier talents in FCS football. He, for lack of a better term, was Weber State's Kyle Van Noy last year, rushing the passer, playing against the run, dropping into pass sets. He did everything as a stand-up pass rush / strong side linebacker type role for Weber State. He brings that to BYU now, and everything I've heard about Jack since he arrived at BYU is he is one of the premier athletes, just in terms of overall athleticism. He's one of the premier athletes BYU's had in that defense in quite some time. That is obviously going to be put to the test this year as he goes out there as projecting to be one of the starting linebackers for BYU going into this season. I think if a similar scenario plays out here for Boyd Sorensen, yeah, he may not be playing linebacker for the Cougars or defensive end, but he could be an impact defensive tackle given the time to develop his body, hone his craft, and show that what he did in high school will translate over. I love multi-sport athletes. I have people ask me all the time, just with my own kids. I got 2 sons. And people knowing what I do ask from time to time, Jake, your boy's going to play football. Yeah, they're going to play football, but they're going to play everything else. I've got my boys playing. My oldest son, who my one son is only 9 months old, so give him some time. But my older son, he plays t-ball. We've had him play basketball. He'll be playing junior jazz this coming year. He's played flag football at this point. We're also going to put him in soccer at some point. I am planning on having well-rounded athletes in my family. Now, are they going to end up being Division I athletes? That's the genetic lottery. You have to just be an incredible athlete to live that dream. But guys like Boyd Sorensen here, that's exactly what I love to have coming into BYU, because he comes in with a chip on his shoulder because he comes from a smaller school, especially coming from the state of Idaho, which often gets overlooked in recruiting. He obviously has very good size, 6'4", 260, but the fact that he played basketball, football, and also was an incredible track athlete, yeah, you can work with that if you're BYU. These are the type of guys, once again, that it seems Jay Hill made a living on at Weber State. Now, can that translate over now to the Power 5 level? That is the next kind of evolution in Jay Hill's development plan for young men like this. And spare me any of the feedback saying, well, this is exactly what Ed Lamb and Elisa Tuiaki did, Jake. Yes, they did this, but here's the difference. Jay Hill is recruiting the likes of Falatau Satuwala, who's a bona fide 4-star all-everything athlete, and gets him to come to BYU in last year's recruiting class. He is one of the crown jewels of that recruiting class. And I'll just say it right now. There's not a chance, and you know what, that Ed Lamb or Elisa Tuiaki would have gotten Falatau to come to BYU. Sorry, I'm just going to say it right now. But also, the other issue is that when Jay recruits those high-level athletes, he also brings in guys like a Boyd Sorensen here and allows them to grow up. While those star players like Falatau, and I know it's different positions, will be early impact guys, or at least project to be that for BYU, you allow them to do their thing. But in time, you allow the Boyd Sorensens to come up and really morph into what they project to be at the next level. The issue with Ed Lamb and Elisa Tuiaki's system was they essentially relied on every Boyd Sorensen in the world and said, that's going to be the backbone of our team. Talent wins, folks. You got to have premier talent, especially at the Power 4 level here for BYU. That is going to be absolutely critical for any and all success that BYU hopes and wants to have in the Big 12. So once again, Jay Hill is approaching this the right way. He is filling out his recruiting classes with top-end talent, as good a talent as he possibly can muster on the recruiting front. But then you go out and offer a guy like a Boyd Sorensen a preferred walk-on opportunity to come in and prove themselves. And if they do prove themselves, you reward them with that scholarship down the line. And ultimately, you hope they become those impact players that, like I said, emerge seemingly out of nowhere. But if your listeners and everydayers here on the Locked On Cougars podcast, you will be surprising folks when you mention the name Boyd Sorensen. Like, how did you know about this kid? Well, I happened to listen to a podcast that's been talking to him for quite some time. So give it some time, but I do think that Boyd Sorensen absolutely has the potential to be a really, really nice piece for this BYU defense if he comes along the way that many project he could. All right, we'll finish up today's show with some thoughts on BYU, the Big 12, and more conference expansion fire. We're talking about that. Where's the smoke coming from this time? Well, it's coming down from the desert, and we'll talk about that momentarily, as well as a big win for a BYU golfer at the Utah State Amateur. We'll get into all that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, please sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a great way to get inside intel from me coming to your phone in the form of a text message. Think about that. You don't have to go to a message board. You don't have to sign into some website to get the updates. It comes to your phone in a text message. You can fire back. We have one-on-one chats on my end as well. It's been a really, really fun feature we've added in essentially the last year here on the podcast. I'd love for you guys to be a part of it. If you're interested in doing so, click the link in the show notes. Whether you're watching and or listening to this, sign up today. You get a 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you, and just $5 a month afterwards. It's a steal of a deal in my opinion, but I'm the one who's selling it. So join us today and join the group that's already on there and have some fun with us on Locked On Cougars, our insider group. All right. Before we go on today's show, first off, congratulations are in order to BYU golfer Cole Ponich. He beat a fellow BYU golfer, Cooper Jones, to win the Utah State Amateur. Now, Cole redshirted this past season for BYU with a back injury, but it healed up enough to play this summer. He won 2-1 at the Ogden Golf and Country Club to beat Cooper Jones, who is headed on a mission, by the way. And you want to hear something about Cooper Jones. Remember, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago. He finished in the top 25 at that Corn Ferry Tour event, and the following week got to compete again. Well, he is going on a mission in September. He's got a mission called to Peru in September, and this kid continues to light it up as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old. I'm not sure what his age is at this point, but Ponich, who's now 23, he had a really, really nice showing, and now he will get an exemption in the U.S. Amateur play later this summer, August 12th to the 18th at Hazeltine National Golf Club in Minnesota. So congratulations to Cole. It's cool to see BYU golfers having their imprint on this. Simon Kwan, a fellow redshirt this past year for BYU Golf, he won it last year. So BYU Golf continues to absolutely dominate the local headlines, and I think that's a really, really cool thing to see these guys getting their opportunity to go out and do what they can do. All right. Final note from today's show I wanted to pass along to you guys is that the Big 12 obviously is remaining open to any and all options when it comes to their expansion. We talked about it last week on Friday. I talked about the fact that I wanted to see the ACC, if they're going to go down, the Big 12 needs to kind of circumvent everything that the Big 12 and the SEC are trying to do and bring these programs, these power programs from the ACC into the Big 12 fold. Well, that's the interesting part, because more smoke has been added to this fire as Jason Scheer, and any of you who know who Jason Scheer is, he is the site editor, publisher, and all-around do-everything guy for the Arizona Wildcats 24/7 site. It's called Wildcat Authority, and I got to give him massive props. Any of you who paid attention to conference realignment and everything that happened last year, Jason was on top of this from the get-go. He was very open and transparent that Arizona absolutely had intentions to jump to the Big 12. He got derided by so many people, both nationally and just fans of different fan bases, saying that you don't know what you're talking about. Well, Jason was absolutely right, and he has fired a tweet out that says this, quote, "According to sources, there is an internal belief that the Big 12, that Florida State and Clemson are likely to join the conference within the next year or so." Okay, folks, this is getting interesting. Obviously, the Florida State and Clemson have those pending lawsuits and have been countersued by the ACC in their ongoing fight about conference rights in terms of their media rights and everything, because they want to get themselves out of the ACC. They see it as a really, really bad deal for them. But we'll see if they can ultimately get that done. But Jason has people in the Arizona athletic department who are absolutely in the know that are feeding him intel. When Jason says this, that there's an internal belief in the Big 12 that Florida State and Clemson are likely to join the conference, I believe that it's absolutely on the table here. Now, in the next year or so leaves a lot of room for a lot of things to happen, because this is not like it's happening tomorrow. There's been a lot of talk about the Big 12 and the private equity or the private credit they could be offered by a private equity firm to allow them to maybe execute such a deal here. I'd be all for it. If you can get power brands like a Florida State and a Clemson, and I think you need to add at least 2 more to go to 20 teams. A couple of you on our Locked On Cougars Insider group actually pointed out to me. I talked about the fact that I wanted to see Miami and Louisville, but a couple of you pointed out, why wouldn't you want Pitt, Jake? It's in a major metropolitan area. It brings the backyard brawl rivalry with West Virginia into the league, and obviously adds another kind of travel partner for Cincinnati in kind of that mid-Atlantic area. I'm all on board actually with Pitt thinking about it. So if you were to ask me what I want to see in terms of if the Big 12 is going to pull this off, yes, you get Florida State. Yes, you get Clemson. Those are two power brands in football. You absolutely bring them in because they will ultimately allow you to have a bigger brand profile when it comes to college football. But then you also add the likes of Miami, who's another power brand, and then the Pitt Panthers. And I think you roll with that. Now, if you want to pick off, let's say a Duke, a North Carolina, a Virginia, even Louisville, I'm okay with that. Maybe the Big 12 just gobbles up all of the ACC and takes 8 teams. I don't know what they're doing, but when Jason Scheer says that this is something that is an internal belief in Big 12 circles, that means that people in the Arizona athletic department, their athletic administration, believe that it's absolutely on the table, and it's something that the Florida State and Clemson administrations are evaluating, and obviously Brett Yormark and the Big 12 are also evaluating it on their end. That would be a really, really nice get for this conference. I think it would absolutely bolster the Big 12 to have them in the fold together. But once again, to have a year or so as the timeline, that leaves a lot of time for a lot of things to change. But hey, where there's smoke, there's fire. And once again, I absolutely believe Jason when he says this, because his track record going back through the last conference realignment run, essentially saying that the Big 12 is going to scoop up Arizona. They're probably going to bring in Arizona State if they can. He was right all along. So if he says this is a possibility, I wholeheartedly endorse it, because Jason has been really, really on top of this for a long time, and he has stuck to his guns amidst a withering bunch of people deriding him and telling him and calling him names and all kinds of stuff. So pay attention, everybody. There are things moving along out there, and I am very interested to see where it ultimately kind of all settles out. Is the ACC going the way of the Pac-12? Maybe so, but it would be the Big 12 essentially forcing itself into the national conversation, saying, okay, you may think it's going to be a power 2, speaking of the Big 10 and the SEC. It's not that. We got a power trio. It's BYU, the Big 12, and obviously the SEC and the Big 10 along for the ride as well. And we'll see if Brett Yormark once again can make magic happen. All right, there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Monday edition of the show. If you guys are out there playing that new EA Sports College Football 25, let me know. Like I said, I'm planning on firing up an online dynasty. Maybe start of the month of August. Give me some time to get settled in with the game, but I am looking forward to playing it. And once again, we'll do some fun things along the way, and I'll report back tomorrow on what my early simulation of the season yielded for BYU and maybe the Big 12 as a whole. Who won the conference? Who's in the college football playoff from the Big 12? We'll have a full debrief for you guys on tomorrow's edition of the podcast. So once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen or view of the day. And a big thank you to all of you once again who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And until tomorrow on a Tuesday, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.